Today we are going to discuss René Descartes and the mind-body problem. Problem in quotes. This is one of the most famous arguments in philosophy. It's got a catchy name. The importance of this is first historical, talk about an argument that was important for the history of philosophy. Second, most importantly for me, I want to talk about how philosophical argument goes by giving you yet another example of a philosopher giving an argument that can then be criticized and broken down. And also, though, there's this extra layer of continuing our exposition of the medieval mind, the way people used to think. Remember, one thing to keep in mind about this argument is that this is not some guy sitting off in a corner somewhere, going off on his own direction without any attention to the way the world works. He's not a hermit, he's not the Unabomber sitting in a shack. René Descartes was at the center of European philosophy. And when he came out with his books, they were enormously popular with the most intelligent people at the time. He was a leading intellectual. So the argument I'm going to give today, the argument I'm going to give this week, because we're spending pretty much the whole time on the mind-body problem, was considered a very, very, very good argument for a very long period of time, and it took a long time to be broken down. It took a long time for it to come out of favor, for people to start thinking that it wasn't a good argument. And I mean, it was enormously influential, and there are still people today, even among intellectual circles, who kind of accept what Descartes is thinking, even though, in my view, this is kind of medieval thinking. This is not modern, scientific, rational thinking. This is not evidence-based thinking. It's not the kind of thinking that gave us digital watches and computers. It's a different kind of thinking altogether. Now, I want to make a point about nomenclature. Things get names. Remember, I talked about the simile of the line, and how it's not even remotely a simile, right? That's just a name. It's the same for the mind-body problem, right? The mind-body problem is not really a problem, it's an argument. And to take it as a metaphor, the way to think about it, in my view, is that the mind-body problem is a problem for Cartesian dualism, the way the detonation of a nuclear weapon would be a problem for a small rabbit sitting on the case of the bomb when it explodes. Yes, the explosion would be a problem for the rabbit. It would be a problem for the rabbit in the sense that the rabbit is vaporized. You will not find a single hair of the rabbit's head after the explosion. Well, the mind-body problem does the same thing for Cartesian dualism. So I explained Cartesian dualism. Keep that in mind. The mind-body problem comes along. It is basically going to kill Cartesian dualism stone dead. All right. Any questions before I go? All right. Now I'm going to give some background. For understanding the mind-body problem, well, actually, the mind-body problem helps us understand the modern doctrine of physicalism. And physicalism is an evolved doctrine. It's kind of the same of what we used to call materialism, at least philosophical materialism, but there's an important difference, which is why they changed the name. They didn't just do it to piss us off. So, Materialism 1. You can see the original doctrine of materialism, the first formulation of materialism, as the idea that everything is matter. I used to say matter in motion, or particles in motion. A very important materialist, two important materialists were Empedocles. Empedocles is the guy who came up with everything is composed of either air, earth, fire, and water, or water. Those are the four elements. For Empedocles, there were various kinds of units of stuff, and he's the guy who came up with the four elements. And then there's Democritus. Democritus, actually it was Leucippus. Leucippus and Democritus came up with the idea that everything is made of atoms, little tiny things that cannot be broken down any further, undivisible little things that hook into other things to make all the matter we have today. Now, materialism, this version of materialism ran into a problem. People said things like, what about magnetism? What about electricity, lightning? Do you guys know what a binnacle is? You ever see this little turret thing on a ship that's around the compass? Now, one of the stories about the binnacle, and I don't know if this is true or not now that I've started telling it, because I always thought the binnacle was just to keep the compass safe. But there is a story that ancient mariners thought that the compass needle was haunted, that there was an evil spirit in it, moving it around, and that they put the binnacle around it as a sort of temple to keep it in from getting out and infecting the crew. So, there's the evil spirit in the compass, and, if you don't have a binnacle around it, it gets out and gets to one of the crew members, and he starts going like this. That would, well, if you were possessed by a magnetic spirit, what would you do? You just point north all the time. You point north all the time. Oh. Geek moment. I have a compass on my watch band. It's not useful, but it's geeky. And I went into REI for a new watch band, and they had lunch with the compasses and said, I want that one. I'm not passing that out. So we're putting out materialism, everything is matter, and they say, well, what about magnetism and light and electricity and what holds atoms together? And they said, oh, okay, there's matter and there's energy. Energy is another stuff. It doesn't get a question mark, does it? How many of you noticed that I screwed up there? Did anyone notice that I screwed up? Well done. You're supposed to notice when your instructor screws up. You don't have to point it out to him, because sometimes they don't like that, but you're supposed to notice. Everything is matter or energy. Why don't we think that anymore? What famous? See it?
Energy is matter.
Energy is matter, yes, and matter is energy, or as they say, matter-energy equivalence. And what is the formula for converting one to the other? Yes! Who said that? Yes! Well done. You're as geeky as I am. Only nerds know stuff like this. I got you. No, son. E equals MC squared. And so the materialists come back and say, okay. Materialism 3. The third version of materialism. Let's hope we got it right this time.
You spelled it wrong.
You're right. It only has one T.
Matterism.
Matterism. Materialism.
Yeah, stuff and I got it.
Hold on. Everything is mass energy. Everything is mass energy. And that actually, like, the materialists look at that and say, oh yeah, that's cool. Mass energy. The stuff of the universe. It's mass and it's energy. And it converts. And we've got wave skills and everything just works out really nice. And then they ask, someone says, well, what's mass energy? Well, it's mass and it's energy. Yeah, but what is it? How do you tell mass energy from things that are not mass energy? How do you tell mass energy from other stuff? Or what makes something material as opposed to immaterial or non-material? How do you tell it from other stuff?
You feel it.
You feel it. That's good. But it's more than that. See. Oh. Got you. Now, I was watching Student Let Me Penn and Teller's bullshit, and I was able to watch some of them, and I was watching the Penn and Teller bullshit on Ghostbusters, or Ghost Hunters. And they have these people wandering around houses with little meters and temperature sensors, that is, thermometers, and ooh, there's a lot of anomalous electromagnetic energy here. Ooh, there must have been a ghost. Ooh, I've got this. Look, we're scientists because we have little boxes with needles that go back and forth. And there's a cold spot here. And look, here's a smudge on a photograph. That's an orb. That's the basic unit of ghostly energy, or whatever it is. That's like, yeah, that's like no controls. They don't go into the house, they don't go into houses that don't have ghosts and check for these anomalies. Everywhere they go, they find ghosts. Because every inhabited structure they go into, they find anomalous electromagnetic readings. They also find electrical systems that are turned on when they're in the house. They also find bits of metal. You know what happens when you bring a source of electricity next to a piece of metal? You induce a current, you create an electromagnetic field. to any piece of freaking metal. Why don't scientists believe in ghosts? Ghosts are not reproducible. If someone comes in and says that they've seen a ghost, there's all kinds of explanations for this. People make stuff up. People imagine stuff. People see things that they mistake for ghosts. What are the current, if you talk to a ghost hunter, what are the current evidences of ghosts?
None.
What? None. Well, they say electromagnetic fields and they say cold spots. Because in buildings, old buildings, you can find electromagnetic fields and you can find cold spots. To a scientist, ghosts do not follow physical laws. Right? A real phenomena is a phenomenon that can be checked. That is, it will behave the same way every time. It's deterministic. Same conditions, same result. My video camera over there works because it is a deterministic system. Put in the same inputs, you get the same outputs. Your car works because it's a deterministic system. It follows physical law. The elements of the car follow physical law. Ghosts do not follow physical law. There's no laws of ghosts. There's no test and retest. There is no experience of... Yes, we had these ghosts and we tested them, and 95% of them exhibited elevated ectoplasm. Ectoplasm doesn't exist. So, ghosts are immaterial because they don't follow physical law. So, we have a new definition for materialism. E equals mc squared is a physical law. It says that if you convert a certain mass into energy, you will get an amount of energy that is equal to that mass divided by, multiplied by the square of the speed of light in appropriate units. So, this is the final form of materialism. Everything is made of stuff that follows physical law. An atom is something whose behavior can be predicted absolutely. Follows physical law. Without the laws of physics, the universe could not exist. If the universe was not deterministic, it could not exist. Think about all the systems in your body. Your brain system, your breathing, your bones holding together, the atoms holding together. If physical law broke down, if the atoms in your body stopped following physical law, you would lose coherence. You would cease to have identity as a discrete being. You'd go down into a puddle of slime or a cloud of mist or something equally unpleasant. Who's here? And this is so different. Yes, sir. What? Everything is not. Oh, that's just Empedocles and Democritus. Those are just names of guys who were materialists. I just threw that in for color. Because we know who these guys, so we know who these guys are. So everything is made of stuff that follows physical law. And it's so radically new that we need another name for it. So we're calling it physicalism. Physicalism is the sort of the final formulation of materialism. It's where we get not only, we go a little bit beyond matter to give a definition of matter. Mass energy is stuff that follows physical law. If it doesn't follow physical law, it's not mass energy. So, to a scientist, if you're going to say that something exists, you have to show what laws it follows. And if you can't prove that it follows some set of physical laws, if you can't tell me the physical laws for it, then it doesn't exist, or it doesn't work. Now, I once encountered members of the Orange County Psychical Research Society, who are some very nice, very earnest people who believe in psychic phenomena. And I was sort of wandering around talking to them, and I overheard a discussion. The president of the society was talking about their beliefs, and someone in their audience said, well, what's your explanation? Or how do you think this all works? Which is a scientific kind of question. If you tell me that there's something happens when you do this, you know, that there's some kind of phenomenon, I'm going to ask you, one of the questions I'll ask you is, well, how do you think it works? That's a different question. Proving it is saying, okay, do controlled experiments. There's two parts of science. One is proving the phenomena exists. The other is explaining it. And the explanation part actually comes after it's been proved to exist. If you haven't proved it to exist. But the interesting thing for me is that this woman said very earnestly, our explanation for this is the same as quantum mechanics. And I had a very strong urge to stick my hand up and say, so how do you account for Bell's theorem? Does anyone know what Bell's theorem is? The only thing I remember about Bell's theorem, it's part of quantum mechanics. It's a well-established part of quantum mechanics. The only thing I really remember about Bell's theorem is that it proves that you cannot use quantum mechanical information, phenomena to send information. Quantum mechanical phenomena are instantaneous. A change over there will instantaneously make a change over here. If you have two particles that are entangled and you interact with one, that will change the other one no matter how far away it is. And this sounds like it would be wonderful for instantaneous communication. The trouble is the way the information stacks up in these things, you cannot send information. It's not logically possible to send information through quantum mechanical phenomena. Psychic phenomena, or what used to be called divination or magic, depends on information transmittal. Right? The psychic claims to have information from somewhere else, either from a pendulum or reading the palm, stuff and says, well, this is quantum mechanical. Well, if it's quantum mechanical, it cannot work, because quantum mechanics is about phenomena that follow laws. And the laws that quantum mechanical phenomena follow mean that you cannot transmit information. So if a psychic says, I'm getting information through quantum mechanics, they cannot possibly be right. If it exists, it's something else, not quantum mechanical. Quantum mechanics is unfortunately an idiot magnet. Have you ever heard of Deepak Chopra? He used to talk a lot about quantum mechanics. Very nice man, very sort of friendly and helpful, and you know, that stuff. But when he talked about quantum mechanics, I When I heard him talk about quantum mechanics, I just cringed, because it's screamingly obvious that the only thing he knew about quantum mechanics was that it's called quantum mechanics. No understanding of it whatsoever. That doesn't mean he's stupid, it just means he doesn't understand quantum mechanics, and he doesn't really realize that he doesn't understand it. Okay, so that's physicalism. Now, monism is the doctrine that there's only one kind of stuff. So if you're a monist, you think there's only one kind of stuff. And there's a couple of kinds of monism. The one I'm going to talk about here is materialistic monism, or materialism, or physicalism. Now, materialistic monism, or otherwise known as materialism or physicalism. By the way, the reason I go through this long thing, getting down to physicalism, is I want to make it clear what materialism is. Fundamentally, it's about physical law. I'm not particularly concerned whether you call it materialism or physicalism. Just if you raise things about issues about magnetism, energy, mass energy, how do you tell mass energy from things, all those questions are answered in terms of physical law. So when it comes down to it, when it gets important, the rubber hits the road, everything is made of stuff that follows physical law. Physical law is the thing here. And I don't mind if you call this materialism, just as long as you remember it's fundamentally about physical law. Materialist monism, also known as materialism or physicalism, is the doctrine. Mind-body problem. The mind-body problem is a problem for Cartesian dualism, the way the detonation of a nuclear weapon would be a problem for a rabbit that was sitting on the bomb at the time. Suppose it would hurt. It wouldn't hurt for a long time, but if it hurt, it would hurt a lot. Let's take care of it. That's too simple. Poor rabbit. I had to point out, I should mention, no rabbits were hurt in the performance of a nuclear weapon under a rabbit. They don't allow me to have nuclear weapons anymore. There's only one stuff, and it's mass energy. That is materialistic monism. There's only one stuff, and it's mass energy. There's only one stuff, and it is stuff that follows physical law. We can tell whether or not something exists by finding out whether it obeys laws. If someone describes a phenomena and it turns out not to follow physical law, it doesn't exist. Now, an opposing theory to this is Cartesian dualism. Now, you guys know what I mean when I use the word being. It actually took me a while to figure out that being just means being. Existence. And there's a branch of philosophy called phenomenology which studies existence. And it can be enormously interesting and entertaining, but also enormously frustrating because all they talk about is being. What does it mean to be? I'm not going to worry about that, but I do want this word, I want you to understand this word in a very precise way. It's just about being. A thing that exists. Mickey Mouse is not a being. Mickey Mouse is something we imagine to exist, or we portray as existing. Same as Santa Claus, right? A fictional being. So if something is a being, it exists, it's real, it can affect things. Now, I want to remind you, at this point of history, there was no deep understanding of reality, of what it means for something to be real. And to a certain extent, well, in my view, there are a lot of people out there who really do understand reality, that know the difference between real and unreal, being and non-being. But not everybody. And even in philosophy, there are people who don't really understand what makes something real. A really quick and easy definition of this is, well, look, if it follows physical law, if it can be experienced, if you can see it and touch it, that makes it real. If no one can ever really see it and touch it, it ain't real. Descartes did not accept that definition of reality. Reality came after Descartes, and part of the reason that we moderns accept that definition of reality, real being stuff that can be experienced, is because René Descartes did this argument, did the mind-body problem, did Cartesian dualism. As he advanced Cartesian dualism, it was met with the mind-body problem. And by studying that argument, we came to see that no dualistic system can work, that our definition of reality has to have to do with experience. So this is part of the process by which we came up with the modern definition of reality, a modern understanding of reality, or the beginnings of a modern understanding of reality. It's still changing. So Cartesian dualism says there are two kinds of being. Mind and matter that have no properties in common. If they have properties in common, then they're not two different stuffs. If mind turned out to follow physical law, it wouldn't be mind, it would be matter. Because we could write down the laws of mind just like we can write down the laws of electromagnetism. We can write down the laws of quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics has a lot of laws. There's a lot of math in quantum mechanics. It's not all indeterministic. It's not all random. So there's two kinds of being. Mind and matter that have no properties in common. That's Cartesian dualism. This is a doctrine that many modern people still follow, that it is wrong. Or in my view, here I ought to point out, you don't have to agree with me about some of the stuff I say. I mean, you can make should be able to make a distinction between me telling you these doctrines, me telling you a bunch of arguments, and then me saying, this is wrong. When I say this is wrong, you're entitled to step back and say, okay, Dr. Young says this is wrong. He might be right. You know, I'm going to remember that he said that, and I'm going to remember what his reasons are. But I don't have to just take his word for it. When I tell you something's wrong, you shouldn't just take my word for it. You should think about the reasons I give you. You see that? I mean, it's okay if you take my word for it, particularly in a lecture, because you're going to take an exam. If I'm right, it's because my logic is good. If I'm wrong, it's because there's something wrong with my logic. The argument I give you is not a good one. And the way to tell whether I'm right or wrong is to look at my logic and figure out whether that logic's good or bad. You can never tell whether someone's right or wrong merely by checking if they agree with what you happen to believe. Because it's always possible that you're the one that's wrong. And I've seen enough of the Penn and Teller's bullshit to know that though I recommend it, I recommend this show. But be warned, some of the shows, they do research, and their position is based on their research. Other shows, they don't do the research. They don't do the reasoning. It's just whatever they happen to think.
And they have nudity.
Say again?
And they have nudity.
Oh yes, they have nudity. There is nudity. In fact, some of them, well, there's a reason that these shows do not go on broadcast TV. There's a reason this is a cable show. So be warned about that. If you don't like nudity or jokes about body parts, you may want to stay away from this show. The Family Values show is excellent, in my opinion, because they actually paid attention to research. Okay, so we have Cartesian dualism. The way you tell whether or not a philosopher is full of crap is to look at his argument. And the last thing I'm going to do this morning is give you Descartes' argument. I'll do it again on Wednesday, but I want you to have it in mind so you can think about it between now and then, if you so choose. Now, Descartes, like Plato, draws a line. But for some reason, this is not called a simile, the simile of the line, perhaps because that name is taken. Now, we're going to talk about the word essence. Essence is another medieval word. It's a word that we use to mean, well, actually, you ever heard the phrase essence of orange? Or essence of this, essence of that? You know, imagine a fresh orange, and imagine going at it with your fingernails, scratching it, and smelling what comes off. You get a very powerful orange smell, unique smell. It's not, you know, it's somewhat different from a lemon or a grapefruit. Now, think about what it is about an orange that makes it different from every other fruit. You know, oranges have segments, but lemons have segments. Oranges have pith, but grapefruit have pith. Orange has pips, but all the other citrus, they have an orange color. Now that's, you know, other things have orange color. What makes oranges uniquely oranges? So the medievals, there's always going to be something about something that makes it what it is and not anything else. So if you go into a high-end grocery store and get yourself some orange oil, or sometimes we call essence of orange, it will be that thing in the orange that gives it that distinctive orange flavor, that distinctive orange smell. The word essence means the thing that makes something what it is. Right? The thing that, well, my essence is the thing that I don't have in common with anything else. The thing that's uniquely me. Your essence is the thing that makes you uniquely you. So Descartes is talking about mind and body. What is the essence of mind? What is it that makes mind the thing that it is and not something else? And for Descartes, it's thought, thinking. And this seems to be pretty good. So far, so good. What makes something a mind is that it thinks. That's the essential thing. Body, the essential thing, the essence of body, is what Descartes calls extension. Now what extension is taking up spaceness. You see this camera bag, it takes up space. It's extended in 3 dimensions. Across, up, back. You guys are getting this, right? Extension. Yeah. Take up spaciness. So what are the things that happen in mind? What are the things that go on in mind? What are the things that are characteristic of mind? Thought. Right? Doubt. Volition. You guys know what volition is? Volition is the mental act that brings about a physical act. A volition is, well, if I pick up the stapler, the mental part of that was the volition to do it. If I pick up the stapler and I'm going to throw it at you, but I stop at the last second, the mental part of me stopping was my volition. And because I didn't throw it at you, I didn't have the volition to do so. So volition is a very important concept because volitions are the things that make the difference between doing and not doing. So there's doubt, volition, hope, affirm, deny. You know, when you're listening to me and you hear me say something and you agree, that's affirmation. If you listen to me and I say something and you disagree, you go, that ain't right. You have that feeling, that ain't right. I want you to imagine that you hear me say something, you have that thought in your head, and along with it, there's something else. You don't say, I disagree, but you disagree. Right? You don't verbalize it. You can verbalize it to yourself, you have that sub-vocalization, I disagree, or you can just know you disagree. And it's the mental part that's the denial. There's the denial and there's the verbalization of the denial. And you don't always verbalize it. You don't always verbalize your thoughts, right? Sometimes you have a thought and then someone asks you what you're thinking, you have to go and you put it into words. You have to take time to put it into words. So there's all those thoughts. It's not just, it's usually stuff that can be represented by words, but it's not in words. So doubt, volition, blah, 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 blah. What's characteristic of body? What's characteristic of physical objects, like this lectern? Well, extension takes up space, shape, size, weight, inertia, there's resistance to being moved. I don't know, they can feel, I'll call it texture. So I want you to imagine Descartes introspecting, or go through this argument yourself. Have a piece of paper and say, I'm going to inventory what I can find in my mind. Things that have to do with mind. You can imagine two people doing this, right? One person makes the mind list. Oh hell, let's divide the class. So imagine that I divide the class and I put everyone on this side into groups and say, you guys have to come up with things that are characteristic of mind. Properties of mind. You make a list, and everything on it is a property of mind. If it's not a property of mind, you leave it off the list. And you guys make a list of properties of body, properties of physical objects. The human body, or celestial bodies, or whatever, you make a list. Now, you go away for an hour and you work on these lists, and then you come back. Descartes would say, you look at mind, you look at your thinking process, you introspect, you think about yourselves, you sit with yourselves, meditate and come up with names for everything you find, and you made your list. And you did the same for body. Only without introspection, because you can't introspect the body. Descartes said, and I think it's true, you will come up with totally different lists. There will be no items that appear on both lists. Everything that's on this list will be absent here. Everything on this list will be absent here. If it's on this list, it won't be on that list. If it's on this list, it won't be on that list. Therefore, they are entirely separate. Mind is an entirely different thing from body. Mind is ontologically different. Mind is a different being from body. Mind is a different being from body in the way that Dodger Stadium is a different body from the Queen Mary. Is a different being from the Queen Mary. They're different things. They're not entangled. They're not two sides of the same thing. They're different things. And from this, Descartes concludes that they can exist independently of each other. Mind can exist independently of body, body can exist independently of mind. If I detonated a small nuke in Dodger Stadium and vaporized the place, what would happen to the Queen Mary over in Long Beach? Small nuke, just to kill it. Queen Mary be unaffected. Now, if I vaporize the Queen Mary, what happens to Dodger Stadium?
Nothing.
Nothing. Descartes thinks that if you destroy the body, the mind will be unaffected. If you destroy the mind, the body will be unaffected. But Descartes doesn't like to think about that, because in his book, he thought, when he wrote the first published book, he proved the immortality of the soul. He thought that he proved that after your body dies, your soul can and will go on and exist forever afterwards. That was in the first edition. After the first edition, somebody pointed out to Descartes that he had not even mentioned the immortality of the soul. He'd said nothing about the immortality of the soul. So what did he do? He changed the subtitle. He took out the subtitle of the book and he didn't mention the immortality of the soul. He just had this thing. Still, this is a huge thing. The idea that the mind and the body are as independent of each other as the Goodyear blimp and the Great Wall of China. Destroy one, you do not affect the other, and vice versa. So, between now and Wednesday, I'd like you to think about this. They have no properties in common. So, 1, they have no properties in common. Therefore, 2, they're entirely separate. Therefore, 3, mind is a different being. Therefore, 4, they can exist independently of each other. Okay.